And for a moment of quiet reflection or prayer as you wish. As we are about to take counsel together on matters concerning this county, we should seek to faithfully discharge our duties of office, both in our debate and in our decisions, and promote the health, safety and well-being of those we serve. Thank you. Please be seated. Fellow councillors, officers and members of the public, including those listening in via the webcast, welcome to our council meeting this evening. We are not expecting a fire drill. Therefore, in the event of a fire alarm sounding, please leave the chamber by the nearest exit and assemble at the rear of the council car park. As with all council meetings, this is open to the public. However, it is not a meeting for the public. Any disruption of the meeting or attempts to interrupt those speaking will not be tolerated and may lead to the clearance of the public gallery. Please turn your phones onto silent. Finally, I'd like to remind members to stand and ensure your microphone is switched on, and please speak clearly into it. When voting, please ensure your hand is fully raised and wait until voting is confirmed before lowering it. Okay, now onto the agenda proper. Item 1 is apologies. Do we have any apologies this evening, Mr. Delaney?
Chairman, we've received apologies from Councillor Ross. Therefore, Council is voting to 26 this evening. Okay,
thank you. Item 2, Chairman's announcements. I will make a full set of announcements at the next ordinary meeting of Council. Item 3, announcements from the Leader, members of Cabinet or the Head of Paid Service. I am likewise advised there are no announcements this evening. Item 4, declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest this evening? Membership of the or use of the centre would not constitute an interest. Councillor Carr.
I know it's not required, but for transparency purposes, I would like to declare that I am a member of Catmos Leisure.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Carr. Any other members? Okay, item 5, petitions, deputations and questions from members of the public. There are no petitions, deputations and questions for consideration this evening. However, the Chief Executive has reported to Council in the agenda supplement that 4 questions were received by the Council, but these were not able to be accepted as to answer them would have required the disclosure of exempt information. Item 6, questions from members of the Council. There are no questions have been received from members this evening. Item 7, report from Cabinet. This is report number 56/2024 from the Cabinet. Members will have seen a supplementary to the report which has been published following the meeting of Cabinet on Tuesday, containing their recommendations. Can I remind members that one of the appendices to report number 55/2024 contains exempt information. As Council is summoned to consider the recommendations of Cabinet with regard to funding, which are public recommendations, I believe the Council can remain in a public session. However, should any member wish to discuss the contents of the exempt appendices, a motion to exclude the press and public will need to be moved, seconded and carried. This is quite a narrow debate this evening about what is in the report, and we do not want to debate anything from previous meetings or go over old ground. We are where we are, and we need a decision maker on this matter. And we must steer clear of any exempt information, such as the levels of funding. Councillor Waller, can you introduce the report, please, and propose the recommendations?
Thank you very much, Chairman. On 26th of February this year, Cabinet recommended a budget to you, which Council unanimously agreed. On the 25th of March this year, Council considered Report 26/2024 concerning the operation of Catmos Leisure Centre. As a consequence of Council's decision, Cabinet was asked to consider the Council's medium-term financial strategy, our corporate strategy and options for funding leisure, specifically for subsidising the leisure contract. What you have before you is the result of Cabinet's deliberations on these matters. No additional finance is available. The decision before you, therefore, is how to reallocate existing financial resources. In paragraph 1.3.3 of the Cabinet report, you will find the criteria Cabinet used to identify the proposed budget adjustment outlined in the paper. Essentially, Cabinet feels that we cannot redirect money to leisure from budget heads where the service includes recent or new service pressures, where there's been a trend in increased demand or costs, or where investment is needed to create savings. Cabinet also does not believe reserves can be used, not least because councils already agreed their earmarked use, largely for transformation, which is necessary to achieve our required savings. My colleagues will explain further later on. Cabinet could have taken the option that to recommend council make no budgetary changes, but this is a negative recommendation, and we understood that members expected a positive recommendation, hence the one in front of you this evening. However, members, your choice is stark. Retain the funding for climate change and flooding, or move that money to the leisure budget in order to subsidise a private company, as no potential provider believes they can run the centre and make a profit without council subsidy. The refreshed corporate strategy, which you also agreed on the 26th of February this year, has tackling the climate emergency as one of its 4 priorities. This priority will not be achieved without the climate change and flooding funding. However, Cabinet's view is that removing the climate change and flooding funding and transferring it to leisure to fund a private company is the least worst option. The decision, however, is council's. If council chooses not to move the funding, it will be used to deal with climate issues, including funding, and will impact across Rutland, benefiting more people than investing in a private company to run a leisure facility in Oakham, a town which already has other leisure venues. Climate change and flooding activity will not take place if the funding is redirected. In order to balance our books, the council has extremely challenging savings targets over the next 4 years, and committing funding to a 10-year contract for non-statutory provision limits the flexibility we and our successors will have to react should the council's savings targets not be met. In this recommendation, Cabinet has provided members with the best possible option for transferring funds to leisure services, which is what we were asked to do. It is not something Cabinet would choose to do, and therefore Cabinet members will each be voting according to their consciences and what they believe is in the best interest for the whole of Rutland, having listened to the debate this evening, and I therefore move the motion on the paper.
Thank you, Councillor Waller. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Johnson. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Johnson, or you? Yes. Okay, so we have a proposal and a seconder, so we're now open to debate. Members. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Waller has clearly outlined the reasons that Cabinet has brought recommendation 1 before you. That is to move funding for flooding and climate management and the rationale behind that reasoning. Implicit in the budget agreed by Council at the February meeting was the aim to create savings to achieve financial stability. This would be by transformation of various services funded out of identified reserves. The savings to be made in children's services, and children's services is a statutory requirement that we fund our children, are detailed in the report, so I won't go into that. The savings identified are 8% of the children's budget. That is challenging and in the limit of what can be achieved. The report also details how these are to be achieved. Basically, the aim is to provide preventative support and targeted intervention to prevent escalation of needs. This is particularly relevant in children's service early years. And the purpose of that is to intervene at an early stage and significantly reduce the needs for educational healthcare plans, which are expensive. This would help progression to expensive specialist schools and support SEND children, that is, children with significant educational needs and disabilities, in the mainstream setting in our local schools. In 2019, there were 197 educational healthcare plans. In 2024, there were 342. So it's no wonder our high needs block, and for the public to explain that a little bit, it is the monies we have used to fund children with complex needs. So I repeat, the high need blocks is now £2.4 million. And given the present trajectory of that high needs block, it is simply not sustainable. It would lead to what's called a Section 114 notice and bankruptcy for the council. Removal of any funding for children's services would have a significant impact on savings required to reduce that high needs block, along with the other initiatives outlined in the report. Impressive work has been done already to achieve this and continues at a pace. Significant reserves for children services alone need to be in place. We have what's called a statutory override on the high needs block, which means we don't have to pay it at the moment, but that is only until 2026. Okay, it may be continued, but we don't know. There is increasing demand and complexity for SEND children. A family could literally walk through our front door with a disabled child or children, and that would cost us tens or perhaps even hundreds of thousands of pounds to fund that disabled child or children. I know because I have to do the exemptions for and sign off. There have been egregious funding cuts to local authorities over the last 10 to 12 years. It means that difficult choices have to be made. Those choices have consequences. If you have this, you can't have that. I would like a climate change officer or an environmental officer. Many other residents would do as well. They've told us in surveys. Rutland is one of the least wooded counties compared to others in England. It would be nice to have more trees and hedges to combat climate change. At the special council meeting on flooding in January, many residents took the trouble to attend, and they were understandably upset. The message that came across was that not enough had been done to prevent flooding.
Councillor Smith, you're coming up to the end of your 5
Yes.
minutes, so you're about to...
Two sentences. So the choices before us are to subsidise a private company out of council tax or use council tax to fund flood and climate change management. I will be voting against recommendation 1. Thank you.
Councillor Smith. Members. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to bring some balance to this debate. Thank you. I think we all know where I stand on this one. And in previous meetings, I won't go over them. You'll be thankful for that. I think I've argued about the benefits of physical activity and the return on investment. So investing in physical activity, for every £1 you invest, you will get a return of £3.91. That is a very good return. What I do want to focus on are some of the inquiries that I've been making about this private company it's now been called, which is what I call Catmos Leisure. These inquiries do have some caveats. So the data I'm going to present you does not include pay-as-you-go, corporate membership, nor external groups, which there are many. It doesn't include the pay-as-you-go on the badminton, basketball or football.
How does this help with the funding decision, Councillor Carr?
I'm going to come to why it's important, because last month there were 772 active memberships. There are 58 classes. Attendance across that month was 8,270 people using the gym, the classes and the personal training, sports massage, parties, gym, GP referral and badminton bookings. There are also 79 GP referrals. I have checked with another gym in Oakham and they are not able to take on any GP referrals. So where do they go? That is my relevance on this. And apart from Uppingham School, there are no under...
This is a point of information, Councillor.
Yes, it is a point of information. GP referrals are not currently being made to Catmos. There are GP referrals in Oakham and also in other parts of the county. And so that's not relevant to what we are discussing tonight. And the reason the GP referrals aren't being made to Catmos is because the person to whom they were made is currently on maternity leave.
I would like to counter that in the fact that I have been presented with information that's contrary to that, and I have got the named person who is dealing with those referrals. But if it needs to go off the record, then I'm happy with that and I will carry on.
So we are debating the funding, Councillor
We are.
Carr.
So it does bring to this decision, and it is like being asked to choose between your favourite child, who your favourite child is. Both very emotive subjects with a lot of public interest. But I am wanting to look it through a slightly different lens, because I agree climate is important, flooding is important. But as Councillor Waller alluded to at the meeting on Tuesday, it wouldn't result in any redundancies. The closure of Catmos will lead to redundancies, and that's the lens that I'm looking through. I'm very disappointed to how we've got here, and I would like, if possible, for people to really think about.
Can you just stop there, Councillor Carr? Councillor Waller's got another point of information.
Yes, please. First of all, the very reason that this funding was put forward, the climate and flooding funding was put forward, was because it wasn't direct redundancies. That does not mean that the transformation programme won't include redundancies. It certainly will cause a reduction in RCC staff. But that's one point. My second is, could I have an explanation, please, of how you propose funding this? Because this is a debate about funding the leisure. It is not a debate about the contract.
Not. Okay, so in Oakham Nub News, that is in the public domain, it published an article last August that disclosed the council had, I think it's 33k underspend. So I do think there's some merit in revisiting budgets to look through them again and find other efficiency savings. And I will sit down, because I do seem to be getting sort of everything I seem to be saying is being discredited. So,
thank you, Councillor Carr. Other members? Councillor Johnson, do you have a point of information?
Yes. Councillor Carr referred to the fact that we had a surplus last year, which we did not. We were overspent by £1.3 million last year, and we're going to be overspent by almost 900,000 this year.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that we are talking about funding, but I just wanted to make a couple of points before then and not go over previous points I've made. I just wanted to state I'm utterly appalled at the process which has resulted in this recommendation coming to Council and the choice that has been put before councillors of either investment in flood management and a climate change officer or managing a leisure service at Catmos. So how does that look to our residents? Maybe we can't do both, but we should not be conflating these decisions. At the time of the election last May, Cabinet was fully aware of the impending decision that needed to be taken about the leisure contract and had been given the opportunity to keep the current contract going to enable the development of a new model and conduct a new tender exercise. They knew the amount of public interest in this decision and the effect on residents. A decision on leisure service was always going to be necessary. We knew the results of the tender process in November, nearly 5 months ago, so any budget implications could have been properly worked through and creatively explored and involved all councillors. Instead, we've let time drift without clear decision making. Where is the policy decision? Cabinet are saying that they're acting on instructions from Council. I would have liked to have seen a policy decision made first of all, this is firmly at the doors of Cabinet, to have a clear strategic view that they should be demonstrating in their role as executive. We've been told that as councillors we could come up with other funding proposals. We have looked at this, put a few forward.
We are debating the funding, Councillor Powell.
Okay. I'm just saying that's the wrong way round. As a ward member for a village that regularly floods and not just in storms, I can't support any reduction in investment in flood management. While Rutland may be performing minimum duties in its role in flood management, we need to up our game and deliver more to our residents. We also need to support residents to keep active and look creatively and work with community groups. Our corporate priority is to improve well-being and reduce health inequalities, and I would ask for specific assurance from the leader that she and the Oakham councillors who supported the campaign last year to keep Catmos open will be fully committed to actively working with the community groups to find suitable venues for the activities and to leave no stone unturned in doing this if this recommendation is finally made not to award the contract and to not redivert the funding. I do accept that difficult decisions need to be made and that decisions in this chamber have a direct result on our residents. Budgets are tight. We do have to make difficult decisions, but this has been made even worse by the sequence of events and how this has been put together. Where is the clear decision and policy making and ownership of these decisions?
Councillor Powell. Any other members? Councillor Ellison.
Okay, thank you very much. I strongly believe, because I'm representing adults social care, so the one budget I want to protect is obviously that one, and because we have had the largest, we already have a planned saving of £1.7 million in the next 4 years, and the aim is to achieve this through radical transformation with groundbreaking plans to improve provision through service design and greater integration of health and care services, striving for synergies and thereby reducing costs by joining up provision. But we are continue to be under pressure with uncontrollable external factors. I think we all know the cost of long-term care continues to rise at above inflation levels. Ongoing needs are becoming more complex. We have a higher proportion of older people in Rutland, 25.3% compared with 18.4% nationally. And there's pressure from hospitals to prevent admissions and support timely discharge, something we're particularly good at. We're already lean in the adult social services. We have small teams covering a breadth of responsibilities, and new reforms are being implemented, adding more pressure and demands on the existing workforce. It's already actively working to be more efficient, recently removing a layer of management. And any further savings imposed upon adult social services would mean reducing staff numbers and have a negative impact. We're expecting a CQC inspection in the next 18 months, and we need to provide good outcomes for people, and we need to show how safe we are. An inadequate rating would result in higher costs for the council. And research around practical and theoretical research around quality management says it's cheaper to prevent than it is to solve the problem after you've had the complaints, the service failures and the poor care. So we've spent 18 months getting ready, and I would hate to see that being disbanded for a lowering in budget. But what can we do about the demand for health and social care? One of the most effective ways, and this is my research, is to actually encourage the inactive to become active. It doesn't have to be a gym.
Members of the public will not intervene. Thank you.
The best method to improve physical and mental health and well-being is through exercise. We accept that. The most effective form of exercise is brisk walking. The research shows this. Advice...
Members of the public, I'm warning you that if you continue to interject, then I'm afraid the public gallery will have to be cleared.
Advice from Health Education England to improve the health of the wider population, and we're looking at Rutland here, from cradle to grave, accessible to all groups, irrespective of gender, ethnicity, sexual persuasion and disability, is to take responsibility for our own health. I'm a prime example of this.
Is this relevant to the budget, Councillor Edson?
Yes, but the cheapest way of getting fit is to walk and cycle. It's to have outdoor gyms, is to make use of outdoor parks, to make use of Rutland Water. We are promoting responsibility for ourselves, for our future health.
This is recovering previous ground, Councillor Edson. What are you going to mention the budget?
So I'm saying that we are already absorbing massive savings under adult social care, and we need to look at other ways of providing it, but not to reduce access to the countryside by allowing the impact of climate change and preventing and flooding means we can't have access to get healthy.
Councillor Ellison, other members. Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'm going to be very careful not to cover old ground, but like Councillor Powell, I would like to make a few points. First of all, what's really, really clear to me with Catmus Leisure, it's actually not just about the exercise. It's about the community. It's about the sense of joy of being a part of that community. And clearly from the various testimonies, I am looking over at you, Chair, and I will shush if I need to. Clearly the impact on prevention, and I believe you have just said, Councillor Ellison, that it's cheaper to prevent. We are in an invidious position where we are being asked to pick between a prevention agenda for one of our biggest communities in Rutland, in Oakham, and then flooding, which impacts the whole of the county, even if simply in terms of travelling. Like Councillor Powell, I am fairly appalled at how we've been put in this position. I believe that Cabinet had taken a net nil revenue cost view to leisure, whether privately or without transparency, because it was omitted from the budget which they presented. We now are in a position where we're asking to do Cabinet's job for them.
You're sailing quite close to the wind, Councillor Stevenson.
I do apologise. I shall step back to the shore. I'm really, really struggling with this process. I will sit down. To have this choice is
Councillor
absolutely
Stevenson,
outrageous.
we have a point of information, unless you're finished.
I will sit down. I think I've made my point.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Councillor Waller, point of information.
The net nil cost option was one that was determined by the previous Cabinet, and when this Cabinet came in, it was what was being tendered, along with other options that a company might provide. That is the fact. And
you've got a point of information.
I've got a point of order, please. As a point of information, sorry, as the portfolio holder, I can confirm that the tender process was for nil cost, but also it had a provision for costed for utility costs. So it is incorrect. We sent both out for tender, not just nil costs.
I
Thank
thought
you.
that was what I said without using the word utility, in fact, because I did say that also there was an option for some cost to the council. But when the budget was being set and it became apparently clear that we were struggling to make ends meet as a council, we felt that the nil, I was being asked, the point being made.
Let's finish this point of information first, then I'll come to you, Councillor Stevenson.
We went for the nil cost. We felt nil cost was the right course of action, and at the time had not completed the tendering process, so we did not know the detail of what was coming back. And when the budget was considered in January, no member of council questioned why we had used the nil cost model.
Thank you, Councillor. Well, Councillor Stevenson, point of information.
Well, there are two. First point of information, the leader seems to have forgotten that we've spent 13 years trying to balance the books. So to suggest that this is news to the leader, that it's difficult to balance the books in Rutland, I'm very surprised by. Second point of order, I believe the outcome of the tender came back in November. I believe the net nil cost is also around things that have been touched on in terms of funding leisure when it's not a statutory requirement. I believe that is covered in the public-facing paper. Thank you.
Councillor Stevenson. Other members? Councillor Harvey. And does I see Councillor West?
Thank you, Chair. I will try and attempt to stick to the budget. In March 23, the yearly performance report stated the information to develop a carbon measure and baseline was completed and received from the Carbon Trust. It was under review to determine the next steps. Council unanimously voted to hold the sustainability role as part of last year's 23-24 savings. That's report 26-2023, performance report 22-23, page 136 of Cabinet document pack 14th of the 2nd 23 for reference. On page 103 of this year's budget papers, report 04-2024 from the 13th of Feb at P1009, £150,000 has been set aside to, and I quote, develop carbon baseline for Rutland with a range of activities and actions to contribute to the corporate strategy. Given that the baseline work was completed by March 23, then this money could be utilised in the development of a meaningful action plan. This is separate to any savings attributed to the sustainability officer role. At P1013 on the same page, we have committed £200,000 to the Section 19 review. Given that it hasn't begun and the Flooding Task and Finish Group has yet to submit its final report to Cabinet, it seems earmarking funds for a post that may or may not be required is slightly premature, given that the needs analysis has not been finalised. These were voted through as read, as we've been advised. As we know, there was no budget allocated for CapMerch. Whatever.
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Waller has a point of information here.
Thank you. Can I ask if Councillor Harvey is proposing something different to what is in the recommendation, as she's touched on things that aren't specifically the recommendation?
Councillor Waller, I'm just merely pointing out to other members that there's £350,000 earmarked for flooding and carbon and climate change already in the budget. Yes, there is.
Chairman,
Councillor Waller.
we do not believe there is spare money in the budget, otherwise we wouldn't have put this forward. There is funding. Could we have an adjournment, please?
Council will adjourn until 20 to 8. 5 minutes.
Look, that's the size I'm using now, and I'm struggling with that.
Andrew?
What? Yeah. Oh, they're not. All right, ladies and gentlemen, members, the meeting is reconvened. Members of the public are not to speak to councillors during this meeting. So, Councillor Johnson, would you like to clarify that point, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I can clarify that the entries concerning the carbon baseline and the Section 19 review for flooding are within Appendix B of the budget pack, and they're on a page which is headed Investment Funded from the Innovation Reserve. So the Innovation Reserve is for items that we need to do of an exceptional nature, generally, and P1013 is the Section 19 review, and it's to sort out the effects of flooding that were experienced in October and January, and it's a sum of 200,000. Similarly, P1009 is develop the carbon baseline for Rutland with a range of activities and actions, etc., and that's at 150. Both those sums of money are for initial work to establish the baselines of what we need to do and to establish a programme of work that we then need to undertake. The resource we are talking about today is revenue-based resource, which I'm sure most councillors, including the previous leader, are fully aware of. This is revenue expenditure that is part of a revenue budget in places. It is not exceptional expenditure. And without the revenue expenditure, we will not be able to enact what is recommended from the investment from the Innovation Reserve, which is protected expenditure.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Yes, yeah, you can. I'm just going to raise a point here that if members do put misinformation out, it will be called out. Points of information are, of course, legitimate. Questions in disguise raising from those points of information are not. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. As we know, there was no budget allocated for Catmos, whichever option council were to choose, and the Cabinet were aware of the costs in November, months before the budget was set. As detailed in the alternative recommendation, associated costs over £250,000 have to come back to Cabinet. It's not clear from either of these or the budget papers how the costs will be met. It's worth us remembering that our officers have for the last few years offered advice on where savings can be made. All of these decisions are difficult. However, in this case, they are recommended saving opportunities. They don't prevent the underlying work of the two work streams, which have been budgeted separately, as previously noted. We are being asked to choose between a rock and a hard place. Mention was made of promises made to the electorate and not wanting to break them. This was regarding a flooding officer. I would ask what happened to the promises made by members sitting around this table last year. Those that made pledges supporting the gym, either around the table, standing outside with protesters, or on local media. I stood up and was counted last year.
How does this relate to the funding, Councillor?
Just my last sentence. I articulated my decision then. Since then, the picture has changed and we've had a positive procurement process. Make no mistake, this is a political decision. I stand by my reasons detailed at the previous exempt meeting. I've seen nothing to suggest I was wrong. It becomes a simple equation. Thank you.
Councillor Harvey. Other members? Councillor McRobb.
Thank you, Chair. Can I say first that I think this, like others here tonight, I think this meeting and that of the 23rd of March were wholly unnecessary. I'm not the only one to think the Catmos contract should have been properly addressed as part of the budget approval process. Like other councillors, I abstained in the vote. I will get to the budget, Mr. Chairman. I abstained in the vote on the 23rd of March because I know that many of my constituents in Oakham Northwest.
Councillor McRobb, you do need to talk about the budget, not what previously has happened and things that happened in meetings that were in private.
Can I explain my reason for abstention was that I hoped money could be found from a total expenditure budget of 50 million. But it appears that the financial cupboard is bare and we are only left with unpalatable options. We're being asked to choose between community fitness and community flooding, and whichever option we choose will inevitably disappoint very many residents. It's an invidious choice, but I believe we have to address flooding as a long-term strategy. The recent storms and floods were a warning. It's very likely they will be repeated, and it's likely that they will worsen. We're here to represent as best we can our constituents, the council, and the county as a whole. When these conflict, we can only choose the option that provides the greatest benefit for all Rutland residents in the long term. We must put aside individual constituency loyalties and think of the greater good. Our choice this evening must therefore be for the long-term security of our communities, and I will consequently vote against Amendment 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McRobb. The members, Councillor Edwards and Councillor Brown.
Sorry, I don't have a fancy bit of paper. My thoughts on this are the words have been taken from me. There are rocks and there are hard places. There is no win situation here. All of what we're talking about is prevention. We're preventing climate issues. We're trying to prevent flooding issues. On the other side, we're trying to prevent health issues. We can't win with this. Whichever budget we choose to take, we are going to lose. So that was it. I think that the sports centre and the community is massively important, but I've looked at the numbers and I've seen that the budget, it just does not work if we don't take the money away from something else that is also massively important. So I'm sorry that was entirely useless.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Paul Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to address you on the efforts that we've made looking into the directorate that I hold the portfolio for. Planning is the first one because it has been not subject to any reduction to date. The local plan has increased the work level considerably. The officers are faced with increased demands not only from the public as to involvement in the process, but also from government. Presently, the department has officers funded on a one-off historical time-limited investment. That time limit is running out. And whilst there's been a recent government agreement to increase fees by 25%, we're hoping that this will enable us to fund those existing numbers. If not, we were to lose those officers. Further pressures from volume, increased considerations, and the latest working ministerial statement from Mr. Gove stating that if matters are not dealt with within statutory time limits, which are difficult to achieve these days, then the whole of the fees will automatically be refunded. Only yesterday, Bristol planners who had failed to reach those time limits had the power to decide all applications removed from them and transferred to the inspectorate, whose costs will then again be paid by that council. A double costing whammy for them. I cannot see that there's any savings in that department that we can reasonably consider if the service is to remain functional. The other aspect of my portfolio is the investment and visitor economy. Previous savings have been undertaken and we now have a single sustainable economy manager. We have only had him for a 6-month appointment, and we're now faced with government changes, hence demands. Our local economy plan requires transitioning as Lincolnshire, our present partner, moves to becoming a combined authority. We have to find another partner, as we are not large enough to employ our own specialists. The UK Shared Prosperity Fund is also devolving to the local authority, and this requires managerial and working on it. There are additional innovations that have to be managed, and for which no additional funding cost is being made available. The new appointment we have made to develop and support these additional measures and to address the original objectives of promoting inward investment and to help develop the visitor economy, which are all essential planks of our new economic strategy, which Council has so recently approved. In addition, we have our corporate policy to develop a diverse and sustainable economy. This has to be important to Rutland and should not be subject to being cut. Lastly, I'll talk about cultural services. This week I presented a proposal to Cabinet. This is an existing major saving target of 301,000, being 42% of the previous budget. This involved major transformation for the museum, involving external partnerships to develop cultural offers, and will involve development of our council's heritage service. Should we fail to achieve the existing planned targets, this will affect our proposals for those transformations and would in effect lead to scuppering our proposals for the museum and putting its closure on the agenda. We have to plan for culture to be eventually self-funding. This will require considerable input and work, and we simply have to maintain our remaining budget. I'll ask you to just bear in mind the next 4 years are really challenging for us on all our budget fronts. We're also being told by government, by Chancellor Hunt, that we're likely to reduce their granting from 2.7 to 1.1% next year. This proposal we're now looking at for this funding will create a considerable financial burden for the next 10 years. And under an ongoing, we'll be faced with such further cuts that will make this subsidy, which is made to a private limited company, which I don't agree with.
Councillor Brown, are you about to finish?
I am, sir.
Good.
And this will make this amount that we're talking about look pretty petty.
Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Okay, I will just finish by saying we've been told that this is a political decision. Yes, it is political, and it's not all on this side.
Councillor West.
Sorry, Chairman. Thank you very much. Making savings is deeply unpopular wherever you make them, and we're presented with a report here from our officers which details every aspect of council business. Adult social care, housing and homelessness, children's services, library and active Rutland services.
Councillor West. Councillor
Point
Stevenson.
of information, report of the Leader of the Council.
Sorry, I beg your pardon, report from the Leader of the Council. Investment and visitor economy, environment and waste services, licensing and regulatory services, highways, planning, enabling services, income generation, etc., etc., etc. Yeah. We sat here in January, I think it was, Chairman, when we had a significant public delegation in front of us making numerous deputations concerning the impact of flooding. We're sitting here again today under the gaze of and about pleasure provision in Rutland. Whatever decision we make here is a horrible one to take, and that is not something I'm particularly comfortable with. The decision that we have to make. One of the big factors for me is risk here. We heard from Councillor Smith that children's services, which are a statutory service, have to make savings of, sorry, 700,000, which of which 45,000 has already been met, but complexity of cases and the rising costs of placement creates risk in the delivery of our savings. Now, we have to make these savings in order to keep the council afloat. Now, if we cannot provide a budget which our finance officer is happy to, that puts this authority at risk. We are at risk of a section 1.1. Said before, I'll say it again. I don't like that idea, but for the benefit of members of the public here, what that means that decision makers will come to Rutland who do not know the area, and they will take a fairly blunt axe to various areas of our vision, council-wide, where we will lose our say as an authority. So the Rutlanders are making decisions. Rutland be shoved out of the way and have a bunch of suits from London come. They will make the decision. But they don't know gyms from transport services, from flooding, from the library, from the museum, from anything else. And we know that. And we're in the horrible position of having to choose between non-statutory services. It's not something I'm comfortable with at the moment. My mind does remain very open on this. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Councillor West, the members. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I am. This debate is really all about risk. We need to focus dispassionately on the risks of the alternatives in front of us. Risk is often viewed as an abstract concept, but it is important that we get our minds around the risks associated with the different paths that we could choose. There are risks inherent in every option available to us. My view is that the least of those risks is in not reallocating the budget. I'm not sure if every councillor is fully aware, but as a council, we are already living beyond our means. We spent £1.3 million more than the funds available to us last year, and we will spend £900,000 more than our funding this year. That's a 2.2 million overspend in 2 years. We've just gone through a period of inflation that we haven't seen for 30 or 40 years, and it is still continuing. The pressures on cost are enormous. There is no point in thinking we can do everything we would like to do. We do not have the money. We must focus on priorities, meeting our statutory duties in the best way possible. This is why we've planned an extensive transformation programme to permanently reduce the cost of operating over the next 4 years. This is an important element in reducing the risks we face. Reality check number 2 is that we are facing an ever-widening gap between our expenditure and our funding. In 4 years' time, we expect our expenditure to be almost £5 million more in a year than our funding. Over the same period, our reserves will have dropped by over 10 million to a total of 13 million as we utilise them to fund the transformation programme. This funding gap represents an enormous risk to our future as an independent council. We cannot just magic up the money to pay for everything we would like, good reasons or not. If we carry on like we are currently, without taking the actions we plan to, without realising the trouble we are in, we will quite soon become bankrupt. Our policy is to avoid this. It will serve no one, particularly our residents. Because some other councils in the past have acted irresponsibly with their funds, a system was set up to manage the risk and prevent situations where councils run out of money. This is why we have a Section 151 officer, Kirsty Nutton, who has a statutory and contractual responsibility to decide whether our plans are financially sustainable or not. It is in her gift to decide whether or not we have a realistic balance between expenditure and funding. She has to manage the risk of the decisions we take this evening and decide if they are acceptable. But I hear somebody say, we have over £22 million in reserves. Yes, we do. But these will be very quickly used up if we don't recognise our situation and do something about it. We are already planning for the level of reserves to drop by £10 million over the next 4 years, and we do not want them to drop any further. Local authority financial rules are risk averse. To avoid a situation where we might be in danger of going bankrupt, we need to stick with our reserve strategy, which we voted for last September. Reserves are our way of managing our financial risks. Reserves are not savings that are there to be used for paying the odd bill we can't afford. They are an important part of our financial risk management system. We have 6 different reserves funds, all designed to be used for different purposes. All are important, and the amount in each reserve has been thought through very carefully according to the industry guidance from SIPFA, the local authority financial body. I hope all members have read the papers and understood what the different types of reserves are there to do. As a council, we have voted to adopt the reserve strategy not once but twice over the last 6 months. We should not abandon these principles now, or we will end up paying for many years to come. Some of the reserve funds are for general use to support the ongoing business of the council, like the general fund and the departmental fund, while others are for specific use to support our transformation programme, like the financial sustainability fund and the innovation fund. The only fund which we will not plan to use anything from is called the Risk Reserve, which contains £7 million. This is for macroeconomic risks and disaster recovery, essentially. It is very important to remember that the amount and nature of our reserves are as recommended by SIPFA. If we are not compliant with SIPFA guidelines, then we run the risk of being classified as an authority at risk of not being financially sustainable or not having sufficient financial resilience. If we are non-compliant, this means that we run the risk that commissioners, I'll say that again, we run the risk that commissioners could be appointed to run the county.
Councillor Johnson, are you about to finish?
Yep. I will do. Can I just say 2 sentences more, please?
Carry on.
If I can. In summary, I do not believe there are sound and valid reasons why we would be able to make unspecified cuts to existing planned departmental budgets. I can't agree with subsidising private company to provide a service which we are not required to provide.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Hemsley.
Thank you very much, Chair. We've always had pressures on our budgets ever since I've been a councillor. That's not very long. Obviously, some people have been here longer than I have. And we've always been cautious and we've always been risk averse. And I think it's very clear from what I'm seeing that in November I understood there was a risk at being able to provide the services to the leisure facility at nil cost. And there was nothing done about it. There was no conversation with anyone. We are a very able group of people in this chamber and we have a lot of contact. So I think that if there'd been an open conversation, we would have been able to find a solution. I understand this isn't addressing the budget completely, but I do have concerns. I listened to the Cabinet meeting on Tuesday. I was here for some of it. And I'm hearing tonight that the members are all defending their budgets, which is quite right. You should defend your budgets. You should be proud of them. But Mr. Smith, you mentioned that a family could walk in, a family could walk out. So we could end up with some savings. You know, we need to stop looking at all the downsides and say, how can we do this? Now, I'm not supportive of funding private companies, but we've just bought some refuse trucks, which will be for use somewhere. You know, it's a yin yang, whatever you want to call it, funding. So you can write the story however you like. I'm feeling that from what I'm hearing tonight, that there's actually a vote of no confidence in the leader from the members of Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hemsley. Councillor Johnson, point of information.
I'd like to point out to Councillor Hemsley that waste is a statutory requirement for us, and having a waste contractor is not something that we initiated, and what we've done is make sure we progress the provision of waste in a better way than was provided before.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Other members? Councillor West, I'm afraid you've already spoken. Are you, is this a point of information? Okay.
Councillor Hemsley said that we are a capable bunch in here. We are, and that nothing has been done amongst ourselves. Well, it goes a little bit further back than last November. But when this contract came up for tender and there were not enough interested parties. I've been with British Rowing for a considerable number of years, and some of my residents in my ward are senior people in Sport England. We had
how is this point of information,
I'm
Councillor
simply
West?
saying, Mr. Chairman, that I did make a significant effort to try and encourage other bidders to come forward at a nil cost.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wise.
Thank you, Chair. I recognise Councillor Harvey said being stuck between a rock and a hard place, because I'm standing here tonight with two parts of my portfolio against each other. I have said I will fight for leisure, but I also have said I will fight for flooding and environment, and I feel absolutely rotten tonight. I had to recognise that Council might wish to adjust our current balanced budget to provide money for leisure. So like every other portfolio holder, I had to look at my portfolio. And it was with deep regret that the only two areas that fit the criteria are the resources earmarked for mitigating flooding and the Sustainability or Climate Change Officer. Just to be clear, the flood resource, if that is withdrawn, we would drop to doing the bare minimum as a lead local flood authority. It would, in all likelihood, be less than we have been doing because of pressures in other areas of highways. Highways would also have to continue to service the planning applications as they do now, but with increasingly complex legislation. And as my colleague here mentioned, the new planning regulations mean that if we take too long over that, we have to return the fees. So that would be a double whammy. So, and I have to say, I think everybody sitting around this table knows how hard highways are being pushed. I do not wish to do anything that makes that worse. It is true that one climate change officer in Rutland is not going to reverse global climate change. We should, however, be doing our part and maximising our impact. But at a recent seminar, I was told that what we're looking at in climate change in this country is not so much changing it as looking at mitigating the effects. We can't stop it. It's on a roller coaster. And those impacts of climate change, flooding is but one that we need to work on. Alongside that, we have an ecological crisis. We are in the process of engaging with the nature recovery strategy. That would be an integral part of this officer's post. The local area energy plan would be an integral part of this officer's post. The impact of the loss of these two resources would be felt across Rutland. It has not been a choice to pick the most emotive. I have heard that said. Let me assure you it isn't. But a choice to pick the areas that would not cause council redundancies or ongoing loss of savings to the council. But I think it's fair to say people will feel very let down after promises were made on both sides of this. Both sides. I'm not denying that. I personally made promises to people in a public meeting on flooding that I would do everything in my power to mitigate those losses into the future. So for all those reasons, despite recognising these are the only areas that can transfer money into leisure, I am minded to vote against these recommendations. And let's be honest, they're recommendations that I put together unless the debate persuades me otherwise. Thank you.
Councillor Wise. Any other members? In that case, Councillor Waller. Oh, sorry. Yes, you've already spoken, Councillor Powell.
I have spoken.
You have? Is this
my,
a point of information?
you can advise me on that. In my speech earlier on, I asked for a question to be addressed by Councillor Wallace, so I wanted to make sure that that would be addressed. Thank you.
I'm sure Councillor Waller will address any questions that have been asked. What was your
I
question?
asked for specific assurance about the Oakham councillors and supporting community groups.
That's a matter for you, Councillor Waller.
Is that okay?
Yeah. It's a matter for Councillor Waller.
I'm prepared to answer the question, and can I apologise profusely to Councillor Powell, because not only did I forget you asked, but I also hadn't written it down, so I'm really sorry about that. But yes, we will do everything possible to signpost people to other opportunities.
I'm sorry, that wasn't actually it wasn't a question, it was asking for assurance.
The answer that Councillor Waller has given is the one that stands, I'm afraid, Councillor Powell. Councillor, are you ready to sum up, as we have no other questions from members?
I am, thank you. We've heard a lot tonight about, local governments always had to make savings. We've always had these problems. And yes, I can remember nearly 40 years ago, as a young officer in a local authority, drawing up my budget in order to make savings. But that was in days when we had a lot more money to start with. In my time as a councillor here, we have ceased to have youth clubs across the county. We have ceased to have day services for the elderly across the county, both cuts we've had to make over time. We're now in a position where we are providing virtually nothing that is not statutory. There are options for even reducing statutory services, clearly. And sorry, I lost my train of thought there. And delivering in different ways. And delivering the statutory services in different ways is what the transformation programme is all about. But people will see a difference. And one of the reasons that we are in the situation that we are now is what was very clearly identified by Councillor Smith, is that demand is increasing. The costs are increasing. The costs of the adult social care place that we purchase for our elderly people who have no means to fund their own care homes has gone up almost twice in the last 5 years, has doubled for each person. So we're not in an easy position, and it's why Cabinet, responding to Councillor's decision last time, has come up with what we feel as Cabinet is the only option open to you. Councillor Edwards said, I paraphrase Councillor Edwards, whatever we're going to do, we can't win. Never was a truer word spoken. We have looked at all the options. We feel there is no choice. The portfolio holders individually have explained why their area, apart from Councillor Wise, their areas can't be touched. And I can assure you that Councillor Wise did not want to put forward what she did. But as you know from the papers that you've read, we set criteria and we asked officers to come up with the options that met the criteria we had set. And we are where we are. So it's very simple, ladies and gentlemen. It is a ridiculously difficult decision to make. Nobody wants to see any provision go at all. But we have to protect as many people as we can. That's our role. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waller. Councillor is now voting to 25. Councillor Stevenson.
Could we have a recorded vote, please?
Sorry? What?
Recorded vote,
No,
please.
it's recorded. Yes, it's going to be recorded.
Cool,
Yep.
thank you.
So I'm going to take each recommendation in turn. As the first recommendation requires a change in the council's agreed budget, a recorded vote is required. Therefore, members must ensure their hands remain fully raised whilst individual votes are recorded. So the recommendation 1 is that Council accepts the recommendation of Cabinet and approves the redirection of funding allocated for flood management and the Climate Change Officer to Leisure Service for management of Catmos Leisure Centre. All those in favour, please raise your hands.
Thank you, Chairman.
Those against, please raise your hands.
Thank you, Chairman.
And those wishing to abstain?
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. The result? Yep. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. As a recorded vote is required, I will list each member in turn. Those who voted in favour, Councillor Brown, A. Brown that is, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Edwards, Councillor Chatfield, Councillor Carr and Councillor Beggy. Those who voted against, Councillor Waller, Johnson, Wise, Paul Brown, Ellison, Smith, West, Lambert, Raymond Payne, Zollinger Ball, Corby, Powell, Wilby, Farina, Payne. Those who abstained, Councillor Stevenson, Councillor Clifton, Councillor Heckles. Therefore, with 6 votes for, 16 against and 3 abstentions, the motion is not carried.
Okay, so that motion is now defeated. So we move on to the alternative recommendation. This is that the Council delegates the authority to the Strategic Director of Places in consultation with the Strategic Director of Resources, the Strategic Director for Law and Governance and the portfolio holder with responsibility for finance not to award the leisure contract and conclude arrangements regarding any financial liabilities to the Council arising from the decision. Where the total financial liabilities to the Council arising from the decision taken exceed £250,000, the Strategic Director of Places, in consultation with the Strategic Director of Resources, the Strategic Director for Law and Governance and the portfolio holder with responsibility for finance, will take a report to Cabinet seeking approval to conclude the arrangements. What's this point of information, Councillor Harvey?
Yes, could I please, on this recommendation, obviously it's coming to Cabinet if it's over 250,000. Just for a point of information, can I ask whether that will be in public or will those figures be exempt? Or just for confirmation, would we know whether that would be at the point it comes to Cabinet? Would that be?
I think
exempt?
that you'll appreciate, Councillor Harvey, that it's important to get information either way at this point in time. You're experienced enough to realise what will determine the decision to take this in public or in private, but suffice to say this council's habitual custom has been to do as much in public as possible.
Thank you.
Okay, so that is the recommendation. All those in favour of that recommendation, please raise your hand.
(13), Chair.
Against?
(2), Chair.
And abstentions?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That recommendation is therefore approved. That, I believe, concludes the business of this council meeting. The date of the next meeting is annual council, which is on Monday the 20th of May. Thank you to members and members of the public. This meeting is closed at 20:21.